Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, August 14th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Ball State game in 22 days. Yes, 3 weeks and 1 day away. The game against Michigan in 106 days. Thanks to our friends at Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed U.S.D.A. prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. Someone else for whom the attention to detail is simply unmatched is Ohio State defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. No, we'll get to you, Tony, in a minute. But Ohio State defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, when you talk to players about him and what he does with them, it is like James Smith was talking about spending like an hour and a half with him at the end of the night in the spring, just watching NFL film over and over and over and over again to look at like real minute details. So Matt Patricia, a smooth transition from Jeff Ruby's of Columbus today on the show. Tony Gerdeman at BuckeyeInsiders.com joins me. He was over with Matt Patricia after we had a chance to talk to him after practice on Thursday. And I think the story of the year for Ohio State, and especially on defense, is new players and how much that's going to mean in terms of a new look for the defense.
Yeah, I think for a guy like Matt Patricia, who's a creative guy, there's got to be some sort of excitement where you've got to have now it's a clean slate, and you've got to try to match or possibly even exceed last year with entirely different players. And I did ask him, how do you balance trying to replace what you've lost in terms of, well, we've got to find the Arvell Reese, we've got to find the Sonny, versus just putting your defense out there that you have. And he said last year is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun. I love all those guys. Looking forward to watching them in preseason games. But it's about this year's team. It's like, well, that's not exactly what I was saying. It's like, how much time do you spend trying to find the next Arvell Reese? How much time are you putting Christian Allegro inside or outside? Or how much time are you focused on that rather than like, you just look at what you have and say, this is what this program, this year's defense can do. So there's still plenty of that going on. Right now, they're kind of they've been in pads for almost a week now. But he said they're working on fundamentals this week, and then they'll start to branch out in terms of what guys can do. But overall, it's been, I think, a fun thing for him to do, because all of these coaches talk about, Urban would talk about drawing on the napkins and stuff. Where I do wonder, last year, is it more fun to have those things and figure out those things, or then how much fun is it now to try to figure out how to replace all of that and do it all again? And these are questions that I'm trying to get asked, but it's a madhouse when you're dealing with a coordinator.
Yeah, and I would assume that it is probably more fun to have by far the best players on the field. Like I would assume as a coach, it's not as much of a challenge, but just sort of winning and being able to push whatever button you push and it works. There's probably a certain appeal to that. But, if you were a coach, Matt Patricia was a literal rocket scientist in a previous career. So, this is not a dumb guy. And he has gone through all sorts of years. I'm sure to the NFL guy in him, it's appealing to have a more challenging schedule and also have to sort of figure it out and not just have, well, we've got two linebackers and they're both going to get drafted in the top 7 at the NFL, so linebackers not at all a question this year. I would imagine it's a little bit of fun to sort of go through that process. And you sort of talked about it a little bit, but it does sound like that is a process where they don't necessarily, we're a week into fall camp at this point, and they don't necessarily have all the answers in terms of how all the pieces are going to fit together and what it's going to mean on Saturdays.
Yeah, and one of the last things he said is he does think there will be more players playing because you have fewer players that can do everything like they did last year. Caleb Downs can do whatever, Arvell Reese can do whatever, Sonny Styles. So it's like you need 6 guys to replace those 3, and so that's what they'll be doing. But then finding places to implement those. Quay Russaw talked about how I'm a third down pass specialist, sub package kind of guy, and that's the plan for him. So it's just finding all of these different plans for each of these guys, as we say, without being too predictable. But yes, on 3rd and long, you are going to bring in your pass rush specialist. And so it's who excels in these different situations. That way, when you're just putting him in situations, things are already predictable. That's why you're putting those guys in there and finding who is the best 3rd and long safety, who is the best 3rd and 2 safety, who is the best 3rd and long second defensive end.
And it's not just the game situations that are going to determine who plays. On defense, sometimes it's going to be what the offense is doing, which determines who plays. Because there's a whole we've started talking about this quite a bit because it feels like it's been sort of one of the like real undercurrents of fall camp in terms of storylines. 4-2-5 versus 4-3. I'm sure they'd love to run a 4-3-5. Right. They will probably get called for some penalties for too many men on the field if they try that. But 4-2-5 versus 4-3. How are you sort of structuring that?
Yeah, or you could do the Notre Dame 4-1-5 and see how that goes for you.
That was, I believe, a 3-2-5, if I remember correctly. They were short a defensive end on the goal line. Yeah.
But yeah, as Matt Patricia said, as Ross Fulton has said, as everybody has said, in terms of offense is what is new is old again. That's Arthur Smith said the exact same thing the day before, where you're bringing in bigger lineups, more 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 1 running back. So you have to have bigger defense handle that. And not gone are the days of the spread offense, but back are the days of bigger offensive packages with more tight ends. And I mean, you're never 4 wide receivers is a rarity. It's always been a rarity at Ohio State, but you've got 2 tight ends, and if you don't have 3 wide receivers, then you can go with 3 linebackers, provided those linebackers can cover. And basically said the same thing about whether it's a 3 safety look, because it's still now you're kind of in between, where that safety has to be big enough to handle the run and also quick enough to handle the coverage. So why not just go with a corner or a linebacker in those situations where you can do the best of those worlds rather than, I guess, least of none. That sort of thing, where if you want a coverage, then bring in a corner. If you want a run stopper, put in a linebacker. So these are all things that are balancing out. Against Iowa, you're going to play 3 linebackers. Against Texas, maybe the 4-2-5, and so you go with the game plan that suits the opponent.
And it feels like, based on what he said, and I want to be, we want to put the standard preseason camp happy talk disclaimer on all of this. And Matt Patricia is an extremely upbeat guy. You are not going to get a lot of, that guy stinks out of Matt Patricia.
He's the worst.
But he does seem legitimately excited about what he does have to work with at linebacker, because it's very easy to frame the conversation around the guys that aren't there anymore. But the guys that are there, you may not have one guy who can just do everything like Arvell Reese, but man, the combination of players there and skill sets there feels like he's like legitimately intrigued.
Yeah, and he's talked about the importance of the middle of the defense. That's where the communication goes out from, and so you need good communicators there. And he talked about how, he said, in terms of just overall play, I like where Peyton's at. That's his exact quote. In terms of the communication, he said, Peyton and Christian are doing a good job, Christian Allegro. And then he said also TJ and Riley are coming along. It kind of gives you a hint of the top 2, which is what we've suspected for a while now. But overall, he said he likes the depth. He even mentioned Eli Lee in terms of guys that are making plays. So anytime some group is out there, he feels okay about it, and they're making plays. I think that's a credit to James Laurinaitis, credit to the players, of course. But he can throw different groups out there, and at this point, there's no scrap that. I mean, sure, throw freshmen with the ones, they're going to make some mistakes, but you know better than to do stuff like that. But everything that they're putting out there so far and trying to see, will this work, I guess has been positive enough to continue considering it.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to do right now. You figure out what's not working, and when you eliminate all the stuff that hasn't worked, then you kind of know what you're working with, and then you sort of refine your process from there. So there you go. Some updates on a few things we learned from Matt Patricia on Thursday. We will be back in the Woody on Saturday talking to Ohio State head coach Ryan Day, but we're going to have plenty more coverage all week long. We got interviews with James Smith. There was some good stuff with him. There was some good stuff with Quay Rusall. Try and get some shows cut up with those in the next couple days. We'll let you hear more from Arthur Smith. We'll let you hear more from Matt Patricia. We got a bunch of stuff coming up. And then, of course, we've got plenty of coverage on all sorts of other things at BuckeyeInsiders.com. Marcus Hartman has some basketball coverage coming up this week. Chuck Milletti will have some recruiting coverage. Going to try and get Ross Fulton on to talk some X's and O's as well. He and Michael Pettit have been killing it on the X's and O's front at BuckeyeInsiders.com. And frankly, it has just been a really fun community. It has been legitimately a really, really fun place to be. I think everyone looks at Twitter right now and goes, it is miserable to be on here. It is just whatever you post, everyone's angry about it. That has not been the case. It is like I have been on Twitter way less because I'm like I like talking to these people about it. So if you enjoy talking to people who are knowledgeable and fun to talk to and not miserable all the time, we would invite you to consider joining us at BuckeyeInsiders.com. That's where Tony and I are your team insiders, Chuck Maletti, your recruiting insider, Michael Pettit and Ross Bolton, your scheme insiders, Marcus Hartman, your basketball insider, plus that fun and very active community on the Insiders board, all at BuckeyeInsiders.com. Join us there. We would love to see you. And thanks again to our friends at Jeff Ruby's Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.